Dan, how's it going?
Phil, I'm doing well, man. Glad to be
Good.
chatting with you today.
Yeah, likewise. So we met on a Facebook group thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
You reached out to me, and your story was intriguing because it said that you had rebuilt your life from scratch.
Yeah.
And then, if you want to care to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, man. And so, my story, I think it's always cool. I love listening to other people's stories. We all have a story, and
Hmm.
even I'm going to tell mine and someone can be like, wow, that's crazy. But we all have our own story. And for me, it started when I was young. My dad got into a really bad accident when I was 4 years old. So I was fatherless for most of my life. And I didn't really understand the implications of that to probably later in life, probably even after I became a father myself, when I realized, bro, I didn't have anyone to mentor me to show me how to do this well. Like, I kind of failed forward. Not that we're ever given like a manual to be like, hey, here's how you raise your kids. You hope you have good people in your life that you can glean from. I did not. I had not a lot of strong father figures. So that's where things kind of started. My mom then turned to drugs and alcohol, and she had her own vices. So I was kind of bounced around as a kid, and kind of felt like yesterday's newspaper. Like, no one really wanted me, but they knew they didn't want this kid just kind of hanging out there. Had stints with my grandma, my aunt. I actually lived with my sister as I graduated high school. But the one thing that taught me, Phil,
Hmm.
was to become very independent, which is a good
Yeah.
thing. I learned
Right.
hard work. I learned that if there's anything that's going to happen, it's going to be because of me, right? I can't rely on anything or anyone. And that served me well for a good portion of my life. But it also was a detriment because I didn't understand the power of delegation.
Hmm.
And I was at 19 years of age working as a restaurant manager. I was the actual manager of a Pizza Hut restaurant in northern Wisconsin, and I just was burnt out working 80 hours,
Man.
right?
Yeah.
So at that point in time, I kind of transitioned, went into radio, did that for a season of life, and that kind of had its shelf life. It was cool. It was fun. It was glamorous, but it paid peanuts, dude.
Yeah.
Did not make a lot of money.
Yeah. Younger days, I went to Ozfest and there was a bunch of radio personalities and stuff. And
Yeah.
I was kind of like, still trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I talked to, I forget his name, something Bob. Anyways, and I said, "Can you make a good living doing it?" He goes, "No, you can't." And so it goes to show you that the importance of having a father figure in your life,
Yeah.
and you need that as a man, or, and I guess it'd be the same for a woman too, or a girl, have a mother figure. That way
Mhm.
you can have that because you have to learn to emulate, not so much emulate, but well, maybe emulate how your father is, if he's a good role model, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
having that building block of a father figure is very important. How did you become the person you are without having those figures? I mean, did you have like someone that you could lean on to talk to, or did you have like an uncle? Did you have someone in your life at all, or no?
Yeah, man, great question. I honestly didn't. I mean, I was always a guy that could, you put me in a room with anyone, I could get along with them. I actually was somewhat of a recluse early on just because of my upbringing. There was a moment in time in my life, and this was kind of a precursor to radio. For whatever reason, I took like an advanced public speaking course in high school.
Okay.
I mean, they say what public speaking is one of the biggest outside of what's the other thing? It's like the people fear the most, right?
Death, I think's the other one,
My
right?
day came where I had to give a public speech, and
Right.
I used to work at the Pizza Hut, and I always used to joke around and cut it up with the people at the restaurant. I would take a plastic soda pitcher and talk into it, and it
Mhm.
made you sound like you had a radio voice, right? So
Mhm.
I would kinda just goof off and like, "It's Dan Ahlborn at Pizza Hut FM," whatever, right? And so I was, like, deathly afraid of doing this, and I was sitting at work that night, and I'm like, "What if I just bring the pizza pitcher and do my speech with that?" So
Mhm.
on a whim, I took it, and I didn't have a lot of friends in high school because I was bounced around a lot. But I went up there, did it, killed it. Like, everyone's like, "Dude, that was the best thing ever."
Mhm.
And realized I had a voice,
Right.
right? And that was kind of the precursor of me kind of stepping into who I was. So
Yeah.
that can help me build my confidence. But I think where that came from is a lot of it was just based upon me, Phil. So as I saw people, I never got super close to people because I think I was so hurt and bounced around that I didn't feel like, now I think about me, I don't know if anyone really loved me,
Mm.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's gonna be because I think it's because of me. My
Mhm.
mom was present in my life, but she was in and out of rehab, and my sister was kind of doing her own thing, and she had her own stuff that she's working through. So it's like I had no direct family that was like, "Hey, dude, love, I want to, be a part of our family," right? So I really didn't realize that ever until probably later in life, truly, Phil, where here I am. having kids of my own at this point. I'm married probably about, I don't know, we've been married probably 10 years or so, and I have 3 kids at this point. We went through a transition with the church we were at and kind of left that. And there was just a lot of kind of some transitional things in my life. I love my kids, but I didn't know how to father them and really be the man my boys needed me to be. And my middle boy was going through some pretty challenging stuff. And then one day he woke up. I was woke up with my wife and like Noah's not doing well. Well, here he basically was taking some type of like Delsum or something. Like he downed like a whole
Mm,
Delsum,
wow.
and his heart rate went through the freaking roof.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were just literally sitting in our bed holding him and like, should we take him in? We're like, let's just give it some time. Let's see what happens. And by the grace of God, brother, like
Mhm.
luckily it went down. But that was a reality check for me. And I just had to get real with him and say, listen, man, I have not been the dad I should be. And I think then I started connecting the dots a little bit, Phil. I mean, I guess I didn't really think that deep at that point in time. Like I'm just gonna do me, man, because that's kind of the mentality. Maybe it's the Gen Xer in me, because I
Yeah.
think that's just kind of how we were. It's like, we'll figure it out, we'll do what we got to do, right?
But that's the thing though, is like, and I think because you've done it alone for so long, that's like, you think, "Well, it worked for me, maybe it'll work for him," but then you have that age gap between you and your son, and it's
Yeah,
and we have a very the kids today have a very different time than you and I had growing up,
for
and it is not easy, but we had our challenges growing up, and they have theirs. I think theirs are a little bit more significant with social media and pressures.
100%. They have a
Yeah,
mirror in their face 24/7, 365. We're
exactly,
kind of, I don't wanna say isolated for some of that stuff, but
mhm.
we were able to pick and choose the inputs we had, where now it's forced upon you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the constant barrage for and then you have the kids that, they got TikTok brain where they're always on that, and it's like and then they see their friends go to the pizza joint without them, and then they start, it's just it's rough being a kid, but we basically just raised ourselves.
Yeah.
So, you were saying, if you don't mind me asking, and you can elaborate it on it or not, but you said that you were having some difficulty with the church. What was that?
Yeah, so we had so a little bit of my background from a spiritual standpoint. My mom was brought up kind of more of an evangelical
Mm,
background. At a young age, I trusted in Jesus as my personal savior, but I also saw some of the craziness of the church. Right? It was
hypocrisy a little bit
yeah, it
maybe.
was some hypocrisy of just some theology things, but more just the people, right? Of
Mm,
just this and then that. And then there was a church breakup. And I kind of saw that at a young age. And even though I love Jesus, I'm like, I
right,
love you, Jesus. I don't
mhm,
got time for this nonsense. So
right,
I never denounced anything. I was just kind of working through my own thing. And truthfully, I lived most of my life from like being fire, like Jesus is the best thing since sliced bread, to being like,
yeah,
Jesus, I'll get back to you, right?
right,
So I kind of just lived a normal life like any average human being and just did the things that, 18 to 30-year-old male will do at that time, such
mhm,
rock and roll.
right,
So there came a point in time in which, fast forward, I got married to my wife. Her and I were it was my first child was born about a year. This is when I was in radio, Phil. So
mhm,
the one thing about radio is you are considered a local celebrity, right? Even though you're not making much, people look up to you, and early on that fed my ego. It was about me, right? Because I was
yeah,
the one who made it. I
right,
told you it's about me.
100%,
I had someone kind of come into my world who was like, "Hey, I really like you," and my wife obviously just getting done having a child. You have those feelings that maybe the grass is greener on the other side of the fence.
gotcha, yeah,
So, I got into probably an inappropriate relationship with this woman, and I told my wife, I said, "Hey, I think we need to separate." So it was like a Friday. I said, "You need to go up to your parents. They lived in northern Wisconsin. Take Danielle, my daughter, and just go for a while. Let's take some time apart."
yeah,
So she did do that. Fast forward over the weekend, came into work on that Tuesday. And at this time, I was the morning show DJ, which is kind of the coveted position in a radio
yeah,
station, right? That is like the crown jewel. So here I am sitting with my co-host. We're kind of sitting doing things. And all of a sudden you get a notification that, hey, there was a plane that hit the World Trade Center. Whatever, odd, right? But you're like, okay. So then, about 20 minutes later, oh, there's a second plane. And oh, it wasn't just any plane, the jetliners. And you know where this is going. This was 9/11, right?
right, yeah,
So I went from being a top 40 music intensive station to almost news talk immediately.
Yeah.
right? So I was normally would be on the air till about 9, 10 o'clock. I think I got off the air at like 11:50. It was a weird time. It wasn't like a
Mhm.
standard time. I was just burnt out.
Yeah.
And of course, what do? I went home and like everyone else, you're glued to the freaking television. This was really
Mhm.
the birth of 24/7 news coverage, right? Where we're just trying to find out the latest details. Is there going to be another this or that? And I called my wife later that afternoon and I said, hey, she was up in North Wisconsin. And this was back, obviously 2000s, and they didn't have all the stuff up there. And I said, have you been watching the news? She's like, no. I'm like, turn the TV on.
Yeah.
And I said, here's the deal. It really made me think about priorities in my life, Phil.
Mhm.
And I said, you know what? You need to come home. And the crazy thing before all that, I had talked to all my buddies, talked to my mom who'd been divorced 4 times, right?
Right.
And I'm like, before I even said this to Diane, I'm like, I think I'm going to get a divorce from Diane. And every person, I was thinking someone's going to be like, you go, man, you do you. They're all like, brother, you're crazy. Like everyone was telling me I'm
Yeah.
stupid. So that
Right,
was the
yeah.
first God nod being like, dude, you're stupid. Then
Mhm.
God really grabbed a hold of me saying, okay, fine. So
Right.
I'm building this up to the story to answer your question. So after this, my wife was brought up in a fundamental independent Baptist background, which is very legalistic. So I
Mhm.
go from this kind of uber semi-liberal church to
Mhm.
like foundational, like we do it this way. You don't
Mhm.
do any other ways. You have this box of Christianity you fit in. You're perfect, right?
Right.
So I went from, having all this things and removing, like throwing out my music CDs and really like going all into that movement.
Yeah.
I will say that season of my life, I learned a ton about the Bible. I turned love about God.
Mhm.
And it was a great growth experience for me. But there came a point in time where we were in this for about 15, 16 years. Our kids were brought up in it.
Mhm.
And we had questions like, well, you say this, but why did this happen in the Bible? Why are there women leaders in the Bible, but you say a woman can't actually teach? Or why
Mhm.
can't someone who's divorced be a leader in the church? So
Yeah.
they try to make these man made rules that aren't really based in scripture, and they
Mhm.
couldn't answer it.
Yeah.
That alone didn't make us leave. There
Mhm.
was one episode specifically, Phil, in which we had come out on Wednesday night, and I was leading the worship at that time, and worship for that church was hymns and piano, right? So don't get twisted. It's not them up there rocking it out. So I noticed that the pastor's wife had my daughter was sitting back next to a friend in the back of the pews, and she had taken her out of the service. Didn't think anything of it. Maybe she just wanted to chat with her. Well, come to find out, she had confronted my daughter, saying like she didn't feel like she was praying correctly.
Ooh,
I'm like, well, first and foremost, why was that appropriate to do during the service? Like to pull someone out
mhm.
of service, that's pretty big, right? And first and foremost, wouldn't it have been better maybe to come to us first versus
Yeah.
just going right to my child? So we went to the pastor and his wife. We confronted them saying, hey, help me understand why this happened. We're confused. We thought it should have been done this way. And that's the biblical thing to do. You go to the people. And their response to us was, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And crickets, Phil. I'm like, wow, bro. Like they didn't even want to talk about it.
No.
So at that point in time, in addition to us seeking, we realized, and my wife had been prompting us, maybe we should look for other churches, but this was a small church, like maybe 100 people at mass at most on a
Mhm.
good Sunday. And I was like outside of the pastor, I was the head deacon. I led worship. I was so ingrained in the church. Like I left, they would be felt. And it's not an ego thing. It's just like
It's
I
just the
felt like
truth, yeah.
I owed it to kind of do what I needed to do. But this was kind of the tipping point that we left. After we left, the church kind of almost blackballed us. All our kids knew was church, right? And all their friends were in church. We homeschooled. That's another story all in and of itself. But so my kids were like, what the heck, dad? We leave this church now. All these people who claim to be Christians turn their back on us. So they're going through their own personal walk. They were all saved at a young age and they're kind of doing their thing, living their life. And we're just loving on them right now. And just right now,
Mhm.
Jesus has nothing to do with their life, and they are
Yeah.
very jaded on just Christianity in general. And it'll come back around. So that was really the preeminence of that. And then I started understanding the idea of identity in Christ and what Christ really wants us to be. And He just wants us to love Him and accept Him and trust Him and live from that,
Exactly.
not live for that and having to do more to get more. Because when Christ died on the cross,
Mhm.
He did it all, dude. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing more we need to do.
Exactly.
Understanding that truth and being guilted to feeling like you need to go to church more, you need to read the Bible more. Yes, that's good stuff, and it's a byproduct of our love for Christ. We don't earn more stuff
Yeah.
by doing those things.
Well,
And that's what the church teaches, you know?
yeah, and well, so I was raised Pentecostal, okay? As I got older, I was saved when I was 6, right? So when I was, my parents drug me to church every week, every Sunday, every Wednesday, all that. And then when I got to be about, I don't know, 11, 12, maybe 13, they started asking me if I wanted to go.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I felt that it just wasn't, I don't know. I needed to go out and and learn things on my own because, and that's the problem that when you get spoon fed stuff at a church, you don't think for yourself. You just go there, you shut your brain off, and you just listen to the pastor. Well, as I've gotten older, I have looked in, I do my own research. I have my
Mhm.
own, I've come to the faith in my own way now, but I'm definitely non denominational. I don't
Mhm.
do this. I don't, because Jesus was not a Christian. You know
Correct.
what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So, yeah.
absolutely.
And it's also, there's so many problems that I have with the faith as a whole anymore,
Mhm.
but we could have a whole other show about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So when did you discover that that you had this resilience inside you that you could power through all this? Because you and I have similar backgrounds, like except I've said it on the show before that my dad was not a great dad. You know what I mean? Like, so I had the experience of a very disciplinary, and like he would just slap me around because he could. You know what I mean? It wasn't like but he was also, and I'm not defending it, but he was also raised in a time, he was born in 1927.
Mhm.
So, and when I was born in 79, so that's almost 50 something years, so there's definitely an age gap there, and that's how he was raised, so that's all he knew, but he didn't take time to learn how to parent a kid, you know what I mean? Well, so how did you discover your resilience to be able to figure this out on your own? I mean, I was lucky enough to have my mother, so.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a few things. I think
Mhm.
the my faith journey was part of this, right? Even though there was some negative experiences in being in the Baptist church, I learned a lot about the Bible and how to study it and how to have a real relationship with Christ. I grew from that, so that's part of it. I think the story with my son was a tipping point to realize, like, hey, I had to become a better father. But I think resilience has always been a part of me because everything I've had to overcome of like not having a father and, running my own restaurant at 18 to becoming, morning show, starting as like the stunt boy on a radio station and working my way up to becoming the morning show DJ. It was my hard work, my effort, even getting into real estate. It was still me doing me, right? And doing a lot of the things. But I think what I quickly realized that I can't do this myself. I need to find mentors, coaches, teachers that I can also lean on. To your point, who can I learn from? Because
Exactly.
you can only consume so many books and so many YouTube videos and so much stuff.
Mhm.
Who's that voice you can go to and be like, hey, I have a question, you know? And I think looking at that and then finding real authentic men that I can look to and be like, wow, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And or, oh, I really I can appreciate how he handled that situation.
Mhm.
Instead of blowing up, he had a real calmness about him. I wonder why that is. And asking questions and going deep about that stuff. So I think it probably around the time we left the church, I really started getting a lot into self-development and just looking how can I could become a better version of myself. And I think a lot of it really got like gasoline poured on it when I went to a Tony Robbins event.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you've ever had a chance to go to one, they're unbelievable. Tony's just it's hard to you can't even put it in words. It's just really what it allowed me to do, Phil, is this is Tony makes you go inward. And we all want to put blame on the outward of like, oh, it's this problem, that problem, it's the economy, it's this. It's like, no, bro, it's you. Like you can control you. The inputs come at you. You get to decide how you respond. So he takes you on this journey. There's a process. It's called the Dickens process. He takes you to like think of the worst, worst, worst situation. Like you're homeless, you don't have anyone that loves you, and like he takes you through this mental journey, and then snaps you back and like, what would if you ever want to be that way?
Mhm.
Really?
Mhm.
And he tells a story about a guy he got to quit smoking once.
Mhm.
And the idea was like, already brought him in a room. He bought like 2 cartons of cigarettes. He's like, light one up, light another one. By the time this guy had literally like 20 cigarettes, he's like, smoke them, smoke them, smoke them. And the guy's like, I don't want to smoke a cigarette. So that's the process that he takes you on of like, listen, this is what could potentially happen. It's probably not, but it could happen. You don't want that feeling, right? You don't want that feeling.
Mhm.
So what are you going to do to never have it again? So I realized I had a lot of self-limiting beliefs, a lot of because of my past. I never felt like I was loved, never felt like I was a good father because I didn't have one. I had a real negative view of money. And how that impacted me, Phil, is even in my real estate business, I've been doing this now for 16 years. It took me 12 years to really get it going. I almost lost my home in foreclosure. Here I am trying to serve people in that space, and I'm on the freaking list that another investor buddy of mine called me like, bro, you good? I see you on the list.
Mhm.
That's humbling, right? So these things I realized, okay, I have to destroy these self-limiting beliefs. And listen, I have to step into the identity of who I know I am and who God made me to be. And a lot of that is just like, okay, how can I do that? Right. So that's where the self development comes in and really just getting better. And it's a work in progress. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but where I would usually get to a point where I would deal with some depression or if something negative came my way, I would absorb it like a sponge and then I would let it marinate in me for, days, weeks, sometimes months.
Mhm.
I'm inactive. Where now it's like, okay, well, why do I feel that way? I don't want to feel that way. How can I change that? Right. So I try to look at more of like the solution versus focusing on the problem.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And then also, I want to say it was Marcus Aurelius. I could be wrong on this. Now, the internet will correct me. It
Yeah.
says, I can't control what happens. I can only control how I deal with it.
Yeah, buddy.
And it's for me, like, I take a lot of pride in my vocation, like, as being a surgical assistant or a surgical tech.
Mhm.
And when I can't do that job to the best of my ability because of limitations, like, the doctor can't make up his mind or whatever, I internalize that and I make it not about me per se, but I get frustrated. It's like, dude, I asked you if you wanted this and you said no.
Right.
The whole reason I became a surgical tech was one, I like the job. Two, we're all patient advocates. That's what we
Mhm.
do. And that's the whole reason we're there is to make sure that patient comes off that table better than they were when they got on it. You know what I mean? So
Right.
for him to kind of mealy mouth and do that, it's just so basically what I'm saying is that's stuff that I can't control, but it's still kind of sticks in my ribs a little bit,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm working on that as we're speaking. And it's because I just it's like, dude, you've been doing this for 30 years. You should know what you need by now.
Right.
But so the having that control of external factors
Yeah.
is something that I'm trying to grasp, and it's getting better. But also I feel that if you keep stuffing stuff down inside for too
Yeah,
long, you're gonna croak of a heart attack. It's like
brother.
the other day we were in line at Walmart or Sam's or whatever it was, and there was a 20-foot gap between the next person and the line. And I was like, so we're like looking for a self checkout. She goes, oh, excuse me, the line's back here. And I
Right.
said, are you even in line? Like, so stuff like that, so
Yeah.
those things I don't let slide. But I'm not rude. I just tell them, just maybe they don't understand what they're doing.
But I think it starts, bro, like with awareness, like knowing that. So, like you said, you're aware of it. And the one thing I teach and talk about with I have a small team, and I also
Hmm.
do some coaching for real estate.
Hmm.
I really say there's two things you really do control.
Hmm.
It's your actions
Yes.
and really your attitude. Now, you can always do through the actions, go through the motions. I mean, you do that all the time with what you do. But if your attitude sucks, your actions are going to suck. You got to make sure the gray matter's locked in and that you're in the right state of mind to do things correctly. And again, no one's perfect, and we get all these things that come at us throughout the day in our life, but it's how we respond. We get to choose that. And I was just talking to some people last night. Like, you get cut off in traffic. What's your response?
Hmm.
You honk the horn, flip off someone, or do you be like, hey, maybe they need to get to work faster than I did? So you get to choose that outcome.
Yeah. So for me, funny story, because I sometimes have the opposite. Mostly I let it go, right? But if it like the other night I was coming home from work and a kid in a Mustang, obviously whatever, came within 3 inches of my front bumper. If he had, so to me, I got a little angry because
Mhm.
to me it's not necessarily he's doing whatever. It's in my brain what it turns into is he values his time more than somebody else's safety.
Mhm. Sure.
And so that's where I get like, and it has nothing to do with being cut off. I don't care about that. It's the fact that
Right.
he thought that he needed to get where he needed to go at the expense of someone's safety. But I understand where you're coming from too, because when you react in a negative way, it sends those bad chemicals in your body and the cortisol and all that. So
Yeah.
that's something else that I'm trying to work on. But it's hard because you have I have the juxtaposition in my brain of do I stuff it down, suffer a heart attack in 10 years, or do I call this guy an asshole? You know?
Well, you got to have some type of release. I think there's some of that, and you have to be able to process that. Uh,
Hmm.
and none of us are perfect. I
Of
mean, we're
course
all
not.
going to have things, and we have, and a lot of what I know too is a lot of these things are based upon how we were raised, how our family treated us. So a lot of these
Hmm.
things are generational, but again, you can break that chain too,
Of
right?
course.
So it starts with the self awareness, and why that's so important to me is, like you said, if you let it stuff inside you, it's gonna hurt you internally, and I think that's part of the reason that we suffer with so much crap today
Hmm.
because people don't have an outlet to have a safe space to talk or a community.
Hmm.
And maybe this is worse with guys than it is with women because we feel like we need to have this bravado and we have all our shit put together and all that
Hmm.
stuff.
Right.
Reality is like, yes, that's true. We should be strong men. I'm definitely advocating that there should be good, strong male people in this world.
Of course.
But it's also okay to show the softer side.
Oh,
Like we have
100%.
emotions and it's okay to cry and it's okay to, and it's having a safe enough space with people that you know and love, whether it be guy friends, a
Hmm.
wife, someone that you can really lean into for that type of stuff. Phil, it's like, man, this happened to me today. And it
Right.
just gives you that release that you can
Right.
get it out where you can not be judged. Maybe not even necessarily have an answer, but just someone can be like, "Bro, I get it." And you just feel better through it, not be able
Exactly.
to have someone solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's like when my girl, because my girlfriend's in real estate as well, so she has her frustrations. And so the other day we were talking, and I said, "Do you want solutions or do you want a sounding board?" And she said,
Yes.
"Sounding board." So I just let her
Gotcha,
talk.
brother. Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's like, so that's that, and that's how you communicate properly in that way, because that way I'm not trying to interrupt her while she's trying to vent, and I'm just saying, well, maybe you should, no, just let her talk. And that way, that's why that strategy of saying, do you want answers or solutions, or do you want a
Yeah.
sounding board, is a brilliant strategy when it comes to communication.
Mhm. Typically for those relationships with men, women, because us as men, we like to fix stuff,
Exactly.
and many times the ladies aren't looking for that. They just want you to listen.
Yeah. Sometimes, and then sometimes they want their opinion in a deeper voice.
Yes,
Yes. So,
for sure.
but yeah. So let's talk about your book.
Yeah, man.
So what urged you to write that?
It's crazy. So, fast forward, I rebuilt my business middle of last year. I said to my wife, I said, my kids are all adults now. My youngest is 19. And I said, what if we just burn the boats and live out one of our dreams and just move to Florida? Time we were living in Wisconsin earlier that year, and they're dealing with it right now. It's cold, there's snow, your face hurts when you step outside. I'm like, man, I'm kind of just done with this.
Right.
And my wife and I always wanted to be near the beach, near the water, that we could drive there.
Mhm.
So we're like, what if we just moved to Florida? A good buddy of mine lives in Southwest Florida. I came down and visited him, and I'm like, yeah, we got to do this. So initially she was shocked, but then we came down and started looking at properties, and she was hooked. Like the first time down, she's like, yeah, this is where we need to be. So we made the transition. We came down here, lived down here, and it was probably the beginning of this year. I was sitting out by the pool. I just had this premonition, and maybe it was a God thing. He's like, "You're gonna write a book." I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna." I'm like, if you had asked me a year ago, brother, like, "You're gonna write a book," I'm like, "That's just not me."
Right.
So I really was like, "Listen, I wanna like, you should tell your story." So I wrote this book. I have it semi-published. It's not out anywhere yet. I have it more privately.
Mhm.
It's done, but it's not done.
Right.
But it's called Flipping My Identity, and it really talks about my story.
Mhm.
About how much of what we've been talking about so far of like the trials I did of having my bike stolen when I was a young kid and how that impacted me, and not having a dad and how that impacted me, and the radio thing and the Pizza Hut thing, and then going through the foreclosure. So it really tells my story of how I had to really come to terms with who I really want to be
Right.
and how I had to step into that. So it was truthfully a lightning turnaround because I went from an idea that afternoon. I took him. One thing I've learned in this life is I take imperfect action. And when I know I want to do something, I put gasoline behind it and just go.
Mhm.
I really became dedicated to this book for about 45 to 60 days and spent every waking hour writing it. And just, I started with voice memos, just putting all my thoughts together
Mhm.
and then, leveraging that and putting together the structure and then using some tools to help me kind of organize that because I'm not a natural writer.
Mhm.
And, I got this finished product, a 100-page book that talks about my journey from, being raised, losing my father at 4 to me moving to Florida and running my business remotely. not running into houses and, running a successful business. So that's my journey. It's my story, but it was just something that I guess I call it nothing short of a God thing that he's just like, people need to hear it. People need to hear the story. So I leaned into it, got it done, wrote it,
Mhm.
and that's where it sits. So I probably maybe this next year I'll officially push it out to Google and Amazon and all that stuff. I just haven't had the time or the resources at this point to do it, but
No,
it's there. It's written. Probably needs a few tweaks
tweaks.
and revisions by someone who knows what they know, but this is the best of what I did, right? Based on my experience. But it was here's what I'll tell you. It was so therapeutic, Phil,
Mm,
because what it allowed me to do, bro, is I was able to actually go back and because I wrote it a few times and had my wife listen to it. She's like, "That's fluffy. Like, there's more to it." So she challenged me to go deeper. What
mhm.
I had to do is I had to literally go back as that child and put myself back in that experience. And these are childhood memories that you repress. Like, you're like, I don't want to go there. No, I had to go there to write this book to put myself in the state of mind. But what it gave me, bro, is a closure
Yeah.
because I was able to see things from a different light, from an adult eyes now, and be
Mhm.
like, I can understand that. Yeah, that was unfortunate that happened to me. So and so treated me this way, but now I can see it in a different light and allowed me to kind of have peace with it.
Yeah.
It was really therapeutic to go through that process. I learned some things about myself and just my overall life and why I am the way I am.
Yeah. So what do you feel that motivates you right now? Because you said, your kids are grown basically.
Yeah.
And what makes you want to keep striving to be better now?
Here's the deal. I'm not one of these guys that like I feel like I need to have $1 million in the bank and I
Mhm.
need to have all the life luxuries. Yes, I live in paradise. We have a moderate home here in Florida, right?
Right.
I still drive 2016 vehicles. I'm, whatever. It is what it is. Uh, but I would say this, like for me, it's like serving and impacting people. Because what I've went through and what I've experienced, like, man, if I could help share this with other people,
Mhm.
if I could help them take the 12 years it took me to figure out real estate and help them bridge that gap and do it in a year,
Mhm.
and my vision, my true vision is much more than real estate. Real estate is the easy pickings because I have experience there. I can teach real estate. I've taught many people how to do deals successfully. I have a handful of students that are doing some great stuff right now, month by month. But for me, it's impacting people more than that, helping them see like there's these things that naturally we go through in life. There's childhood memory, stuff like that. There's neuroscience that really our brain gets wired a certain way at an early age. The beauty of it, brother, is we can take the construction crew into our brain intentionally and rewire those synapses. So instead of our default being a negative or an unhealthy thing, we can rewire it to be a positive and an uplifting thing.
Correct.
Understanding the root of the problem, fixing that, not putting a Band-Aid, not giving it a pill, but fixing that and going there and then building from that and building a new path to where you want to be or where you really know where you'd like to be. And that's the truth. And that's what I talk about identity. We all know who we want to be,
Mhm.
but because of these self-limiting beliefs or things in our past, we feel chained or shackled to that. Like that's the way Phil always was. That's the way Dan always was. I call that shenanigans. Like, yeah, you can live in that space or you can choose to be someone different. We all
Right.
want to be something different or better. We have the power to determine and change that. And I teach people how to do that.
Yeah, that's good. I think you are shackled not you as Dan, but people in
Yeah, yeah.
general are shackled by their experiences, right? Like when you have someone that like me who had a father just constantly ran me down,
Yeah.
beaten, and just made me feel less than. It takes a and then, everything's my fault. No matter
Mhm.
what, like everything's my fault because that's just how I was taught because it was. So coming and I'm still almost 50 now and I'm like I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to get rid of that because it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, screw up at work, your fault. Somebody else screws up at work, your
Yeah,
fault. So I think trying to change who you are fundamentally that way is an incredibly difficult task.
it is.
But if you don't want to be that person, which I don't, and I hate being that person, so you got to do what it takes to remove that psyche stuff out of your head
Yeah.
and just remember that our our models or role models or whatever are flawed too. Nobody's
Yeah.
perfect, like you said. So what is the biggest accomplishment that you're proud of that you've done?
Well, I mean, I think, truthfully, one of the biggest things I've been able to do, well, I mean, I've quite a few of them. I mean, I think as I started off with maybe not being the best father figure, I think I've really been intentional of rekindling that relationship where I had a really negative relationship, perhaps with my middle son for some time.
Mhm.
Him and I have such a healthy relationship now. It's one of these things in which he comes to me and asks me like questions, and we just have really awesome, like just really good, like,
Mhm.
stuff. Like, it's super healthy, bro, and I think I've really tried to reclaim the time, even though when I was younger, maybe when the kids needed me and I
Mhm.
wasn't maybe as present because early on, remember I told you it's all about me, and I
Mhm.
felt like I love my kids, but I didn't have time for them.
Right.
Now, like, okay, I have time now. I can try to be more intentional. I go out of my way to call them and figure out what's going on in their life, right?
Uh,
So that's important to me.
mhm.
From a professional thing,
Mhm.
like, I in my real estate business, I was struggling pretty mightily. Shortly after I almost lost my home, we would do okay. I was doing some transactions, but nothing to the level. And then I had a situation where I was running a partnership with some friends of mine and they came back to me. We'd started this partnership back in 2020, right before COVID. And we're like, well, what do we want to do? Because literally we joined forces February of 2020. And then, of course, the world shut down in March. And we're
Of
like, what do
course.
we do? And like, let's see what happens. And quite honestly, real estate did very well during COVID. So we did our ride. Business was going well. We were kind of growing a small team. And then 3 years later, they came to me. They got back from a mastermind and they said, Dan, we love working with you. We just don't want to be in business.
Mm.
And bro, that hit me like a ton of bricks because the reality is they had other stuff going on. They were doing some private lending, they were in commercial, they had other irons in the fire. This was my meal ticket. And I was not that diversified at that time. And I was kind of freaking out, right? Dan from, 5 years before would have just folded. So I realized I needed to do something differently. This was also, I think it tied into the fact where I went to a Tony Robbins event. So it was like the perfect situation
Mhm.
and I think what I was able to do is really understand, like, I needed to take massive imperfect action to figure this out. So I went from, doing a handful of deals a month that in 8 months after that, I rebuilt the business because they were like, oh, take your time. We can do this over. I'm like, no, we got to rip the band-aid off. Like this, the longer we
Mhm.
stay together, and I'm still great friends with them today.
Yeah.
They always like, Dan, you keep telling that story. I'm like, because it's just true. Like, they're
Yeah.
not mad about it, but it's like, that's the way it had to be. And we're
Mm.
cool with it. Right. But it's like, I literally said, "I'm gonna start my own business." I built my own brand, went after it, and in the first 8 months by myself, generated $500,000, no revenue.
Nice.
Now, I've never done that ever before in my life. What was the difference in that? Well, the difference was that I realized I'm not the guy who I used to be. I stepped into this imperfect action. It wasn't always pretty. I also got myself a mentor. I
Mhm.
found someone who was doing things at a high level that I could kinda lean on, right, and utilize their skills, techniques, systems, implemented some of that into my business, and then just went after it. And that's really what catapulted me to where I am today. And that's a big accomplishment. Now I'm 3 years in this entity, and we're continuing to scale and grow year after year.
Mhm.
And now without growing pains, every business has that for sure. But it's been a fun journey. So those were some of my biggest accomplishments, in addition to just, moving here. I mean, moving to Florida. I mean, it's a dream that many people don't have that opportunity. And I've been very blessed that I've been able to afford to do this and did it the right way. Did it with my wife and her and I just, live a great life with our dog, which she's not in here today, but he's been kind of out of sorts with me. He was in the garbage this morning and mad at him. And ever since then, he's kind of knows that. So he's normally in my back pocket. He's normally like you'd see him in the background nowhere to be found right now. He kinda knows he's in the
The
doghouse.
doghouse. Yeah.
Those
That's
those
awesome.
really have been my biggest accomplishments, and I think that's what feeds me, what juices me is the ability to impact others,
Mhm.
and, I learned that at an early age. When I was in I did inside sales for a while, and I was a pretty good sales rep. I wasn't the top guy, but I was like that next tier down, like consistently making my months, just making my months, having some good months here and there. And then I was, brought into management and I was like, well, how do you get the thrill of like securing the sale? Cause that's kind of fun.
Mhm.
I learned I could teach and educate someone how to do that. When someone else got the sale, the exuberation and just the joy and happiness I received from seeing them do it
Mhm.
far exceeded whenever I did it. And at that point, I was hooked. I'm like, this is what God's wired me to do. God's given me a voice. God's given me the opportunity. I want to teach and speak.
Mm.
That got actually nerfed, truthfully. Um, when I left the church, when I left radio. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping off the place, so I
No, no, go
apologize
ahead, please. I do it all the time.
on here, but you got me up a little bit of the trail. When I left radio and went into, the church thing for that season of life,
Mhm,
I realized, like, I felt like the gift of public because it was all about me, ego, right? Being on radio, you're the guy, right? So I kind of stepped out of that for a while and I became very reserved, wasn't posting on social media. I felt like that was part of the reason maybe why I almost lost my wife, right? So I needed to
mhm,
get my priorities right. But there's always been a fire deep inside. From the day I pulled that soda pitcher off the shelf and did that in front of the classroom, I felt like I had a voice and I felt it was muffled. So moving back down here to Florida is where I really rekindled that. And God's like, no, man, use your voice, but do it for me. Right. Not necessarily, he's given me the gift to speak and teach. And I love doing it. I really do. Like, put me in front of a stage. It's not because I'm getting the applause and adoration. It's like, I literally feel like I can just speak and empower people to help them.
yeah,
And it's through him, not me. Right.
right.
And by coming from that mindset, like it's freeing and I can use the gifts that I have. So those are the things that really drive me, motivate me, and really help propel me to where I want to go in life.
Yeah. This might be a sensitive topic, but
Certainly.
how's your relationship with your mom now?
My mom's great. She's actually so her and I have really reconciled in the way that my mom does. I think she realized, I'll say this. The whole idea behind my dad,
Mhm,
the story is untold of why it happened. And there was a season in my life that I felt like I was on a mission to solve that mystery. I came to peace saying, I don't need to know. Because what does it solve? Right. And I more kindled my relationship with my mom. So through that journey, my mom has kind of reconciled with me. My mom had lived in Pennsylvania with my sister for many a years. She was in her last relationship, which was somewhat abusive. He was on drugs and alcohol, and my mom was still kind of teetering on that plane. So she got super clean going out to PA, didn't have that stuff in her life. She is now completely sober, has
good,
been so for a while. She has since moved back to Wisconsin. And when I was in Wisconsin, this was COVID, like 2020, she moved back. For the last 3 years, I was very intentional of going and visiting her, spending time with her. And it was some of the most precious time, Phil.
good.
And we didn't get into deep stuff, but then one day my mom sent me a letter and she just was unprovoked and in a roundabout kind of way just said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's her way of making amends.
It was and we don't talk a ton about it, although we could. I
Mhm,
think there's just a common appreciation, and we have such a healthy relationship now where we can talk and just have candid conversations. And for whatever was done, if she was for whatever happened, I forgive her of that, and I love her to my heart of hearts. She's in good health. She's actually coming down here in a week or so to spend some time with us in
great.
Florida, which will be fun.
Yeah,
So our relationship
no,
is super healthy. So
good.
that's something in the last year or two I've really looked at my relationships, Phil, and trying to find people that I wanted to get around and be around more and be intentional with it and pour into those people. Like every
Absolutely.
year I kind of do this list of like goals and then I
Mhm,
pick people like, hey, here's what I think I'd like to get to know more. I want to involve myself and maybe understand or learn them or mentor with them or whatever. So those are just part of my things I do each and every year. I love pouring into people and serving.
yeah, and it's so what I've learned is that when you like, you have the ability to make amends with your mother, right? And
Mhm.
that with her intent of writing you that letter, it lets you know that she's a changed person, and that way you're able to when someone makes an effort, that can lead you to forgive a lot.
Mhm.
Like someone that like that's why I've learned that when I mess up, I brood for a minute because I'm a stubborn guy, and then I go and then I'm like, you know what, go apologize, dickhead, because you were wrong. So I'm really glad that you guys are able to have that relationship now, and that's a beautiful thing. Like if I was at a therapy session once and somebody asked me if my father was in front of me, what would I do? I said I would take my fist and put it through the back of his head. Now that was old angry Phil. That was a long time ago. I mean, but I also you have to forgive people. I've forgiven my father and for all the crap that he did and didn't do.
I love just talking about life stuff in general. And it's,
I mean,
my wife and I were just talking the other day, and, I think there's no perfect family,
no,
right? I mean,
there's not.
there's always, and typically the season of the holidays, the family drama always kind of brews up, right?
Mhm.
So we can all look at our extended families and be like, man, there's just some craziness. And one thing I can say, and my wife and I, and we've set our life up, we set up our business and things like that, that, God forbid if we leave, like we're trying to mitigate drama as much as humanly possible. But
Mhm.
we have healthy relationships with all our kids. We can have candid conversations with them. The people that I love the most, that are the closest to me, I feel like I have some really deep, solid relationships. Doesn't mean we agree on everything. We can also be okay to be like, that's okay. We don't need to agree. But I'm very blessed that I have really healthy people that love me in my life and I can
Mhm.
reciprocate that. And to your point, if I goof and screw up, because I'm a knucklehead too, I can be man enough to be like, yo, bro, I kinda goofed, and that's more times with my wife than anything else.
Mhm.
But that's the crazy thing, it's like, I feel like I'm a pretty good communicator, I really do, like, I
Mhm.
I feel like I can bridge that gap with most people, but for whatever reason, God brought my wife into my life to be like, "Alright, dude, humble yourself, you're not that
Mhm.
good."
Yeah.
A lot of times I'm like, why can't I get this right?" But she's so graceful with me, and we have great conversations and talk it through, but it also helps me grow,
Mhm.
and I think I've just been on a big growth trajectory over the last 2 to 3 years as well, just to become a better version of myself and I can love people and serve.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're here to do. We're here to love one another and serve.
Yeah, right.
That's why I chose the job that I do. But I mean, granted, I do it for money because I am a human.
We need to pay the bills, bro.
Exactly. And it's like, so I think uh, having a routine and having, these acts of service. And it's not just, we were mentioning ego earlier. I've worked with surgeons that have had some incredible egos in my time.
Mhm,
And then when they fall hard. So that's
mhm.
why I am a huge opponent of ego. I try not to have any. Although you're always going to have a little bit because we're human and that's what we do. We all have a sense of pride and that's hard to disconnect from who we are.
Yes.
But I think it's life is about service, taming your ego, and doing as much good in the world as you can, and
Mhm.
when you can. And all I when I see somebody on the street and if they need it, if I have it, I'll give it to them if I can. So that's just about being a service of man. So where can people find you?
Hey, man, yeah, I mean, if they wanna connect with me, I'm on the socials. You can go to my website, which is danahlborn.com. It's DANAHLBORN. I had a good old hearty Germanic name with the silent H. If you go there, I actually have a free ebook that you can download. It's not the full Flipping My Identity, but this is called Flip Your Future. Talks
Okay.
about how you can really maximize your life with real estate and gives you 5 tips on how to do that. Also, if you wanna follow me on socials, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's just at Dan Ahlborn. Right? You can also check me out on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. I'm out there. I'm not a hard guy to find. Just if you Google my name, you will find me. And yeah, follow me. I try to give, I try to serve a lot of value on my social posts. It's just not frivolous crap of, doing. I mean, you're going to see stuff on my dog because, he's just goofy and dumb. But other than that, I try to add value to people's lives and things go. And I like to share what's going on in my life and how I've learned from that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how I can help teach.
Awesome. Well, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find the show on Spotify and YouTube. So
Let's
I
go.
want to say thanks again for coming on. Appreciate you.
Brother, thank you. Look forward to it.